Two words changed everything. Two words that got mocked on late-night television, turned into memes, and became the punchline of dinner-table conversations for years. And the woman who said them? Written off as out of touch, precious, ridiculous. But here's the thing nobody bothered to ask. Why would anyone choose words they knew the whole world would laugh at, unless those words were the most honest ones they had? It was March 2014 when Gwyneth Paltrow posted an essay on her own website, and the internet exploded before she could finish a coffee. Conscious uncoupling. That was it. That was the phrase that turned her into a cultural punching bag overnight. Comedians built entire monologues around it. Columnists sharpened their pens. Strangers at dinner parties decided this was proof that Gwyneth Paltrow was the most insufferable woman alive, a wealthy actress so removed from reality she couldn't even get divorced like a normal person. Everyone laughed. Everyone assumed she was wrapping her failed marriage in wellness language and expecting applause. But nobody stopped to read what she was actually saying. And more importantly, nobody asked how long she had been carrying this before the rest of the world even knew there was a problem. Before there was a Chris Martin in any of this, there was already a Gwyneth Paltrow, and she was not waiting in the wings for anyone. By the time the two of them met, she had already won an Academy Award. 26 years old, standing on that stage in 1999, crying through her acceptance speech for Shakespeare in Love while the entire industry decided she was the next great American leading lady. Her father was a respected television director. Her mother, Blythe Danner, a celebrated stage and screen actress. Gwyneth grew up around discipline, around craft, around people who took their work seriously. She had the range. She had the pedigree. She had the Oscar at an age when most actresses were still fighting for a callback. She did not need a rock star to make her interesting. She was already one of the most photographed, most discussed women in the world. Remember that, because it matters for everything that comes next. They met in late 2002, backstage at a Coldplay concert, just 3 weeks after Gwyneth's father died. And that detail is the whole story right there. She was grieving. She had just lost the man who shaped her, the man who understood her. And into that raw, open wound walked a soft-spoken English musician who wrote songs about heartbreak and longing and looking up at the stars. Chris Martin was gentle with her at exactly the moment she had nothing left to hold on to. He didn't push. He let her be sad. And to a woman in mourning, that kind of quiet tenderness can feel like being rescued. They married in December 2003. Small ceremony, no spectacle. She was already pregnant. Their daughter Apple arrived in May 2004. Their son Moses followed in April 2006. From the outside it looked like a fairy tale, built fast and built real. The golden actress and the thoughtful rock star, two creative people raising two beautifully named children far from the noise. And for a while, the world believed in them completely. They kept their relationship private when everyone else was selling theirs. They split time between London and Los Angeles. Coldplay became one of the biggest bands on the planet, filling stadiums on every continent. Gwyneth kept working, kept winning, and somewhere in there she started building something from her kitchen, a little newsletter she called Goop, that would eventually become bigger than any film role. They looked, for the better part of a decade, like proof that two famous people could actually make it work. But somewhere around 2010, something shifted. And nobody could have named it at first. There was no scandal. No other woman screaming for attention on a red carpet. There was just distance. The kind that builds so slowly you don't notice it happening until you look up one day and realize the person across the breakfast table has become a polite stranger. He was on the road for months at a time, continent after continent, hotel after hotel. She was deepening into her own world, and that world was looking less and less like his. Gwyneth was becoming a wellness entrepreneur, obsessed with clean eating, with cleansers, with macrobiotic diets and infrared saunas and a kind of disciplined, optimized living that defined her every waking hour. Chris was a musician who liked things messier, more spontaneous, a man whose whole art was built on feeling rather than structure. She gave up gluten, dairy, and processed sugar. He wanted to order a pizza. That sounds small. Almost funny. But it is not small at all. The way two people eat is the way two people live. And slowly, quietly, they were living two completely different lives under one roof. Friends started to notice they were rarely photographed together. She would arrive at events alone. He would tour and she wouldn't follow. They had stopped finishing each other's sentences and started managing each other instead. Then came the 2013 Met Gala, one of the most photographed nights of the year. Gwyneth arrived at the top of those famous steps, dressed immaculately, cameras flashing. Chris was on tour in Europe. That same night, Beyoncé and Jay-Z posed together. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds walked the carpet arm in arm. And Gwyneth Paltrow smiled for the cameras completely alone. Nobody made a big deal of it then. But later, looking back, that was the moment people pointed to. The night she showed up to one of the most public relationship events in the world and didn't even pretend he was coming. She knew it then. She knew it when friends asked how Chris was doing and she realized she hadn't actually spoken to him in days. She knew it when the breakup rumors started circulating later that year and her public denials felt hollow, even to herself. And here's the part the jokes always missed. There was no single dramatic discovery. No lipstick on a collar. No late-night confession. There was something quieter, and far more devastating. Gwyneth woke up one day and understood that she and Chris were no longer growing toward each other. They were growing apart. And they had been for years. And pretending otherwise was costing both of them their actual lives. She has talked since about how hard those years were. How she didn't want to fail at marriage. How the idea of breaking up a family terrified her to her bones. This was a woman who had lost her own father, who knew exactly what it meant for children to lose the shape of their family. She was not going to do that carelessly. So she did what so few people have the strength to do. She looked straight at the truth instead of looking away. The marriage had already ended emotionally long before either of them was willing to say the words out loud. Whatever final straw existed, it wasn't a betrayal. It was honesty catching up with both of them. By 2013, they were quietly living mostly separate lives. The decision had, in a sense, already made itself. All that was left was to be brave enough to admit it. And this is where she made the choice that got her ridiculed, and that history is slowly proving was right. The essay went up on Goop in March 2014. They called it conscious uncoupling. And the idea wasn't even originally hers. It came from therapist Catherine Woodward Thomas, who had built a structured approach to help families survive separation without destroying each other. The whole point was simple. You can end a marriage without ending a family. You can stop being husband and wife without becoming enemies. You can choose, deliberately and consciously, to protect your children from the war that usually follows divorce. That is what conscious uncoupling actually means. Not a punchline. A promise. And the way each of them carried it afterward tells you everything. Chris Martin poured the heartbreak into music. Coldplay's next album, Ghost Stories, was openly written about the separation. Raw, honest, and heard by millions in stadiums across the world. He grieved out loud, the way artists grieve, by making something the whole world could feel. Gwyneth grieved quietly. But she did something harder. She put the promise into practice. She didn't write a tell-all. She didn't give bitter interviews. She did the daily, unglamorous, exhausting work of staying in a real relationship with the father of her children. They went on family vacations together. They sat in the same room for the kids' milestones. When she remarried and when Chris moved on, they folded each other's new partners into the same extended family rather than drawing battle lines through their children. And this is the contrast the jokes never let people see. While the world was laughing at her for being soft, she was doing the hardest version of divorce there is. Anyone can slam a door. Anyone can hire the meanest lawyer in town and torch the whole thing on the way out. What almost no one can do is end a marriage with so much grace that the children barely feel the ground move beneath them. He turned his heartbreak into stadium anthems. She turned hers into a shield around her children. She figured it out first. She was the one who saw the truth before he was ready to. The one who named it. The one who designed a softer landing for everyone before the fall even happened. She didn't wait around hoping things would change or that the distance would close on its own. She looked at a marriage that no longer fit the woman she had become, and she had the courage to say so, gently, and to mean it. Remember when I told you she was already the famous one? That she didn't need him to be interesting? That's why she could leave. She was never dependent on his shine. She had her own. The laughter got it completely wrong. Conscious uncoupling was never about being precious. It was about being grown. It was a woman refusing to let the end of love become the beginning of cruelty. Most divorces leave behind wreckage that children spend decades cleaning up. Gwyneth Paltrow looked at that and decided her kids deserved better, and she actually delivered it. Years later, with Gwyneth remarried to Brad Falchuk and Chris in a long-term relationship with Dakota Johnson, and the children grown into steady young adults, the joke doesn't look like a joke anymore. It looks like the smartest thing anyone in that whole story ever did. She didn't leave Chris Martin because she stopped caring. She left because she cared enough to stop pretending, and because she loved her family enough to protect it, even from herself. That is not weakness wrapped in wellness language. That is one of the bravest things a person can do. Years after the world finished laughing, Gwyneth and Chris stood together at Apple's college graduation, surrounded by their extended blended family. 2 former spouses, 2 new partners, 1 unbroken family, smiling like people who had achieved what nobody thought possible. The joke was on everyone who underestimated her. She wasn't being ridiculous. She was being right.